Sudan descending into violence, with deadly gun battles exploding on the streets of the capital, Khartoum.
This is what a country looks and sounds like when the two generals fighting for control both refuse to stand down. Sudan, the largest country in Northeast Africa, population almost 50 million people. But today, its capital city, Khartoum, buried under a relentless string of aerial bombardment, explosive urban warfare, thousands of people desperate to escape the fighting, and a death and injury toll that just keeps going up.
The Washington Post reporting dozens have died.
There are reports that roughly 100 civilians are now dead.
Fighting between the Sudanese army and the paramilitary group Rapid Support Forces has left hundreds of people dead.
At least one American is among the more than 600 who are confirmed dead.
It was, not long ago, Sudan was on the cusp of a once-in-a-generation transition, a shift to a civilian-led, democratically elected government. But with an election on the horizon, two men, one an army general, the other the leader of a paramilitary group, would derail everything. They both want control of the country, unable to agree on the precise path to democracy. And now, an entire nation is on the brink of a civil war. The Sudanese people are caught in the middle. And the world isn't just watching the country unravel. It's taking an active part, with some of the world's foremost military superpowers picking sides, exploiting Sudan's natural wealth, and adding to the bloodshed. To understand just how far Sudan has fallen, you have to understand just how hopeful the people were just a few years ago. They overthrew Omar al-Bashir, the man who himself had taken power in a military coup. He ruled for 30 years, accused of authoritarian repression, widespread human rights abuses, torture, political instability, and economic hardship. His downfall was to pave the way for a transition to civilian rule. But then, in October 2021, what critics call a naked power grab. Sudan's army, led by General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, pushed out the acting president, essentially hijacking the country's very delicate path towards democracy.
I do want to connect you to a fast developing story out of Sudan where a military takeover is in progress. Just within the past few hours, the head of the armed forces dissolved the joint military-civilian government.
We are dissolving the Sovereign Council and removing the state's governors.
That 2021 coup saw the army and the RSF, or Rapid Support Forces, seizing power together and dampening hopes for that democratic future. That is, until they became enemies, unable to agree even on who should command the military once they merged. That's where we are now. The Sudanese army now sees the RSF as a rebel group. And to anyone looking from the outside in, these are two bad dudes. You know, both have had a long-standing involvement in some of the country's bloodiest conflicts, including a brutal campaign in Darfur, considered the first genocide of the 21st century. Here's how someone whose organization has worked in Sudan for 2 decades describes it.
We need to remember that 300,000 people died in the very early stages of this conflict, and that the two warring factions right now that we're seeing fight for territoriality and power in Khartoum and across the country, these were some of those same military leaders who were involved in leading the various militia groups and the military endeavors in Darfur and elsewhere across the country. This is a catastrophe on top of a crisis.
And even before this latest round of violence, Sudan was facing acute humanitarian challenges, now only made worse.
We know that about 16 million people in total in Sudan, a third of the population, rely on humanitarian aid. Unless there is some kind of humanitarian ceasefire and urgently, and a guarantee of safe passages, not only of those goods, but also those services, those humanitarian actors who are on the ground, who need to be assured of their safety, then meeting the needs of those civilian populations is next to impossible. And that will be absolutely devastating.
So now Sudan is in an incredibly vulnerable position, facing political collapse, deadly violence, a vacuum of aid, and no clear way through. But there's more, because deep underground, below all of the fighting, lies incredible wealth. Sudan is literally a gold mine. And those countries with the means to fuel a war and exploit the country's natural resources are only too happy to do so.
There are global tentacles to this conflict. Some of the most active players have included China, as well as Russia, which has major gold concessions within Sudan.
And that bears repeating. Some of the most active players are amongst the biggest, richest, most powerful countries in the entire world. The fear is about civil war, but fanning the flames, global players with a sizable stake.
They have arms that have been provided by China, by Russia, by other global players. Last year alone, 2022, Sudan was the largest country in Africa when it came to gold exports. So unfortunately, there are a lot of financial resources that are available to continue this war for a considerable length of time.
There is an organization called the Wagner Group. You can think of it as a powerful Russian mercenary body, one that has allegedly been active in Sudan for years.
Wagner Group is a massive militia outfit which has been created under the patronage of Russian leadership, giving all sorts of support, assistance, intelligence, even military training to the paramilitary forces, which is RSF, which is one of the fighting now in Sudan. So I think this is where also the Wagner Group developed a huge business interest, got engaged in the gold mine and other business issues together with RSF.
According to CNN, the New York Times, and others, it has been instrumental in smuggling gold out of Sudan to fund Russia's war in Ukraine. How'd they do that? Reportedly by making a deal with the Sudanese army, effectively guns for gold. Wagner Group denies this.
There are reports of massive amount of gold being shipped or airlifted to Russia just before Russia invaded Ukraine. And also Russia wants to have a military base in the port of Sudan, and that will also be very close to the China's naval base in Djibouti. That really brings a major transformation of Africa and Middle East.
And this is why this story isn't just about yet another African country in turmoil. It's about foreign actors, a power play with the highest of stakes, and an entire people, millions of them, stuck in an endless cycle of violence. Now, over the weekend, Canada made the decision to pull some of its own people out of Sudan. In a tweet, the Prime Minister said this: "We've temporarily suspended Canada's operations in Sudan. Our diplomats are safe, they have been extracted, and are working from outside the country." And countries around the world are getting their diplomats out as well, as carefully and as quickly as possible.
Through a dangerous landscape, the convoys move with urgency and caution. Diplomats from around the world are shuttled to different departure points. Multiple boats transported diplomats and their families to Saudi Arabia. Germany airlifted their team out, as did France and the United Kingdom. The U.S. president personally authorized one of the riskier rescue missions, sending helicopters to land near the U.S. embassy.
But we should point out here, there are still 1,600 Canadians registered as being in Sudan, according to Global Affairs, many of whom have been asking for help getting out of the country, but without much of a clear plan ahead. And it goes without saying, as the fighting gets worse, it will get increasingly difficult to evacuate those people who are still there. Just 2 hours ago, Foreign Affairs Minister Melanie Joly tweeted this: Canadians in Sudan, we are exploring options regarding departure assistance in collaboration with like-minded countries and the international community for as soon as conditions allow. We'll keep an eye on this story, and we'll be back after the break.